Chapter 2. The next day it had stopped raining, but a thick white fog had lowered over the house. "I'm going for a walk," said Coraline. "Don't go too far," said her mother, "and dress up warmly." Coraline put on her blue coat with a hood, her red scarf, and her yellow Wellington boots. She went out. Miss Spink was walking her dogs. "Hello, Caroline," said Miss Spink. "Rotten weather." "Yes," said Coraline. "I played Portia once," said Miss Spink. "Miss Forcible talks about her Ophelia, but it was my Portia they came to see. We trod the boards." Miss Spink was bundled up in pullovers and cardigans, so she seemed more small and circular than ever. She looked like a large, fluffy egg. She wore thick glasses that made her eyes seem huge. "They used to send flowers to my dressing room. They did." "Who did?" asked Coraline. Miss Spink looked around cautiously, first over one shoulder, then over the other, peering into the mist as though someone might be listening. "Men," she whispered. Then she tugged the dogs to heel and waddled off back towards the house. Coraline continued her walk. She was 3/4 of the way around the house when she saw Miss Forcible, standing at the door to the flat she shared with Miss Spink. "Have you seen Miss Spink, Caroline?" Coraline told her that she had, and that Miss Spink was out walking the dogs. "I do hope she doesn't get lost. It'll bring on her shingles if she does, you'll see," said Miss Forcible. "You'd have to be an explorer to find your way around in this fog." "I'm an explorer," said Coraline. "Of course you are, lovey," said Miss Forcible. "Don't get lost now." Coraline continued walking through the gardens in the gray mist. She always kept in sight of the house. After about 10 minutes of walking, she found herself back where she had started. Her hair was over her eyes and was limp and wet, and her face felt damp. "Ahoy, Caroline!" called the crazy man upstairs. "Oh, hello," said Coraline. She could hardly see the old man through the mist. He walked down the steps on the outside of the house that led past Coraline's front door to the door to his flat. He walked down very slowly. Coraline waited at the bottom of the stairs. "The mice do not like the mist," he told her. "It makes their whiskers droop." "I don't like the mist very much either," admitted Coraline. The old man leaned down close so that the bottoms of his mustache tickled Coraline's ear. "The mice have a message for you," he whispered. Coraline didn't know what to say. "The message is this: don't go through the door." He paused. "Does that mean anything to you?" "No," said Coraline. The old man shrugged. "They're funny, the mice. They get things wrong. They got your name wrong, you know. They kept saying Coraline, not Caroline at all." He picked up a milk bottle from the bottom of the stairs and started back up to his attic flat. Coraline went indoors. Her mother was working in her study. Her mother's study smelled of flowers. "What shall I do?" asked Coraline. "When do you go back to school?" her mother asked. "Next week," said Coraline. "Huh," said her mother. "Suppose I shall have to get you new school clothes. Remind me, dear, or else I'll forget." And she went back to typing things on the computer screen. "What shall I do?" repeated Coraline. "Draw something." Her mother passed her a sheet of paper and a ballpoint pen. Coraline tried drawing the mist. After 10 minutes of drawing, she still had a white sheet of paper with mist written on it. and in one corner, in slightly wiggly letters. She grunted and passed it to her mother. Very modern, dear, Coraline's mother said. Coraline crept into the drawing room and tried to open the old door in the corner. It was locked once more. She supposed her mother must have locked it again. She shrugged. Coraline went to see her father. He had his back to his door. He had his back to the door as he typed. "Go away," he said cheerfully as she walked in. "I'm bored," she said. "Learn how to tap dance," he suggested without turning around. Coraline shook her head. "Why won't you play with me?" she asked. "Busy," he said. "Working," he added. He hadn't turned around to look at her. "Why don't you go bother Miss Spink and Miss Forcible?" Coraline put on her coat and pulled up her hood and went out of the house. She went downstairs. She rang the door of Miss Spink and Miss Forcible's flat. Coraline could hear the frenzied woofing as the Scotty dogs ran out into the hall. After a while, Miss Spink... Where'd I go? After a while, Miss Spink opened the door. "Oh, it's you, Caroline," she said. "Angus, Hamish, Bruce, down, lovies. It's only Caroline. Come in, dear. Would you like a cup of tea?" The flat smelled of furniture polish and dogs. "Yes, please," said Coraline. Miss Spink led her into a dusty little room, which she called the parlor. On the walls were black and white photographs of pretty women in theater programs in frames. Miss Forcible was sitting in one of the armchairs, knitting hard. They poured Coraline a cup of tea in a little pink bone china cup with a saucer. They gave her a dry Garibaldi biscuit to go with it. Miss Forcible looked at Miss Spink, picked up her knitting, and took a deep breath. "Anyway, April, as I was saying, you still have to admit there's life in the old dog yet." "Miriam, neither of us is as young as we were." "Madame Arcady," replied Miss Forcible. "The nurse in Romeo. Lady Bracknell. Character parts. They can't retire you from the stage." "Now, Miriam, we agreed," said Miss Spink. Coraline wondered if they'd forgotten she was there. They weren't making much sense. She decided they were having an argument as old and comfortable as an armchair. The kind of argument no one ever really wins or loses, but which can go on forever if both parties are willing. She sipped her tea. "I'll read your tea leaves if you want," said Miss Spink to Coraline. "Sorry?" said Coraline. "The tea leaves, dear. I'll read your fortune." Coraline passed Miss Spink her cup. Miss Spink peered short-sightedly at the black teas in the bottom. She pursed her lips. "You know, Caroline," she said after a while, "you are in terrible danger." Miss Forcible snorted and put down her knitting. "Don't be silly, April. Stop scaring the girl. Your eyes are going. Pass me the cup, child." Coraline carried the cup over to Miss Forcible. Miss Forcible looked into it carefully, shook her head, and looked into it again. "Oh, dear," she said. "You were right, April. She is in danger." "See, Miriam," said Miss Spink triumphantly. "My eyes are as good as they ever were." "What am I in danger from?" asked Coraline. Miss Spink and Miss Forcible stared at her blankly. "I didn't say," said Miss Spink. "Tea leaves are not reliable for that sort of thing. Not really. They're good for general, but not for specifics." "What should I do then?" asked Coraline, who was slightly alarmed by this. "Don't wear green in the dressing room," suggested Miss Spink. "Or mention the Scottish play," added Miss Forcible. Coraline wondered why so few of the adults she met made any sense. She sometimes wondered who they thought they were talking to. "And be very, very careful," said Miss Spink. She got up from the armchair and went over to the fireplace. On the mantelpiece was a small jar, and Miss Spink took the top off the jar and began to pull things out of it. There was a tiny china duck, a thimble, a strange little brass coin, 2 paper clips, and a stone with a hole in it. She passed the stone with the hole in it to Coraline. "What's it for?" asked Coraline. The hole went all the way through the middle of the stone. She held it up to the window and looked through it. "It might help," said Miss Spink. "They're good for bad things sometimes." Coraline put on her coat, said goodbye to Mrs. Spink and Forcible and the dogs, and went outside. The mist hung like blindness around the house. She walked slowly up the stairs to her family's flat, and then stopped and looked around. In the mist, it was a ghost world. "In danger," thought Coraline to herself. Sounded exciting. Didn't sound like a bad thing, not really. Coraline went back upstairs. Her fist closed tightly over her new stone.